perspective. I'm still just a little bunny in a turtle, and I have to trust the owner and the master.
Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Welcome, friends, to the Book Therapy Podcast. Thank you for joining me here today. We have a special guest for our episode today, and I can't wait for you to hear all about his book and all he has learned in the past few years. But first, if you are enjoying these episodes, please consider leaving a positive review. I would love that, and it really helps new listeners find the show. Thank you so much for your support of the Book Therapy Podcast. Let's dive into today's book. This episode will be featuring our first guest. I have my husband with me. His name is Kevin Patton, and he wrote a memoir. The title is Too Small to Understand Why, a memoir of caring for rabbits, turtles, hamsters, and faith. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You're in our house. You didn't come very far.
I know. I bought it with our very own money.
So that's a long story, but this book has so much packed into it. We've been married for almost 12 years, and there's so many stories. There's a lot that we have learned in our journey. There's a lot that you have gone through personally, medically, emotionally, mentally, and we are not going to be able to dive into everything. But what I do want to talk about is kind of the high points. So why don't you start by explaining the subtitle and how we go from bunnies and turtles to faith?
It was a struggle to decide what word pairs bunnies, turtles, and faith, so the word caring was crucial. But I wanted to write a memoir that not only described our first 10 years of marriage and the junk we've been through, but try to do it in such a way that described my years of caring for rabbits and turtles, and I threw the hamster in there just for good measure. Started because of an article you wrote that described a terrible night that we can get to in a minute. I did have a grand mal seizure about 9 years ago now. That's crazy. That started a couple of tests that I had run, which I had run before, but nobody found the diagnosis officially. And so I went to a neurologist again, and they finally found out that I had micro seizures and mild cases of epilepsy. And so rather than going on antidepressants and then other medicine to get my irritability down, which we kind of left at the beginning, the doctor recommended dark chocolate, which I was all for. And then she said maybe get a dog or something that makes you happy. I eventually got a turtle, and that made me happy. The apartment we were in said we couldn't have fish, so I got a turtle. And then eventually I got a rabbit. And so that started my journey on that. And they eventually grew their family, which that's in the book, those stories. I just paired my years of caring for these creatures with our trials and how they never understood what I was doing for them. They just tried to survive, and then I just try to survive what we've been through.
It actually works. When you read the book, it's amazing how he lays out the stories of the animals and caring for the animals and pairs them with his own personal struggles and just the parallel of what he was going through mentally and physically and struggling in his faith a little bit towards God and kind of questioning a few things. The way the animals helped him answer questions is really something that everybody can relate to, because we all go through struggles that make us question what God is doing and why God is doing it. Let me read a quote from the preface. You'll see how he also uses Lord of the Rings as a way of explaining what he's gone through and how to relate it to the big picture. So this is the preface. I can't do this, Sam. There was a time when I would have never dreamed of uttering such words. They admit defeat. They portray mental weakness and foresee quitting the task at hand. No one likes a quitter. With a proper dose of humility and a strong support system, I have always been prepared to achieve goals and overcome any failure. Of course, this quote is not original. It is embedded within one of the most legendary narratives, The Lord of the Rings. Later in the preface, he gives us a little bit of an introduction of what the book is going to be about. As Sam explained, the difficulty in hearing troubling tales is being too small to understand why such things occur. Here's my attempt at using some amazing and small creatures to offer some answers. How did your journey start, and what was that terrible night? Please don't go into too much detail because I'm still slightly traumatized and I really honestly don't like talking about it. And I don't often talk about it on purpose, but it is where our story begins. And so, from your point of view, what happened and why did it shuttle you into a whole new world that you never expected?
Yeah, you could probably answer this question better than I can because you were awake and I wasn't. But the story does begin a few years earlier. I was either in high school or college when I started having little spasms in my chest or brain. I don't know even where they begin. Have a trigger or a thought or something I can be conscious of. Something just surges through my body. I'm always conscious and nobody even knows it's happening. I had multiple tests run. Nobody could see what was going on, even when I had one during the test, EEGs, EKGs, and no one found it. Eventually, I was at my desk at seminary. I was awoken from a daze, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I ate for dinner, or where I was, or what day it was. The only person I knew was you, which was crazy. My parents came up from Georgia to Chattanooga and rushed me home for more testing and still didn't find anything, which was awful because I thought I was going home forever. But I got back to school, which was good. And I had memory loss several times after that, including during a Grand Canyon trip a couple years later. So eventually I did have my grand mal, again, about 9 years ago. And so I still have these micro seizures, as we learned them to be called, and I have medication ever since that grand mal night. And so yeah, that's the journey, and I'm not unique in this. This happens to people, and they have medicine, and everybody takes the same kind of stuff. But we just kind of deal with it in our own special way, and so that's what it is. And it was an odd journey for me because anybody who knows me closely knows that I was known for my academic abilities and my memory and stuff like that. So for me to lose memory or to struggle or to have deja vu or any type of memory problems was a struggle. I talk about in the book having almost an identity crisis going through this and losing purpose and all that. So it was a battle. For a while. It affected my pursuit of my doctorate, and eventually I had to drop out, not specifically because of this, but it was definitely a factor. So this whole journey was quite a battle.
A segue to that next big topic that we want to cover is mental health and depression, and how did all of these mental struggles and physical struggles lead you to kind of a pit that you found yourself in very quickly? And how did you get out of that pit? And what was depression like for you?
To be fair, these micro seizures did not directly lead to depression. It was a number of other circumstances. We were at college and went through ministry and other demands, and from a social perspective and spiritual perspective and academic things that I don't think and looking back, I think we would agree, we weren't quite old enough or mature enough to handle where we were. So depression came in that way. But when I got to the dissertation stage, depression came in again because of other factors and other things that were just too much for me in my mental state. So I go through seasons of depression, but I would not classify myself as clinically depressed. I could get out of bed and function. I know there are others who have had terrible things happen, or maybe not, and they just have this mental illness on a much grander scale. So I don't want to try to link myself where I don't belong, but I did struggle in certain ways. So the point of all this is when I was growing up, and I know my generation did battle, in their own special ways, but I was probably learned either intentionally or unintentionally that mental illness and faith may not go hand in hand. And now, for the better of us all, we're learning that it's okay to have our own struggles as long as we can handle them, with faith and with trying to learn and in community and surrounding ourselves with the proper venues of health and wisdom. So I end chapter 1 with this dichotomy of faith and depression. And how does that work? Because at the time, I was even a pastor going through a season of this, and that's not normal or typical, at least as I was growing up again. So here's a paragraph that I end chapter 1 with. It's on page 31, and it says, "How can I not smile at all times? Because my mind is weak, battered, and worn. I live in a chaotic and broken world where my soul may become crushed, a burden too heavy even when I know where hope lives. Can I understand the truth, teach the truth, and still feel drained by sorrow? Yes. But do I believe and cling to the one who accepts me as his own? Yes. The past 10 years have confirmed in my heart that these are not mutually exclusive ideas.
Just as a picture of some of the struggles he's been in, I remember a Sunday morning where we drove to church and we were quiet. We were going through a lot, and those days, sometimes it was hard to go to church. He worked at the church. We got there an hour earlier, and I remember pulling into the parking lot, and he was listening to the radio, and there was a song that really meant a lot to him, and he just put his head on the steering wheel and looked over at me. He was singing about the faithfulness of God while tears were gathering in his eyes. And for me, it was something powerful, but also extremely difficult, because I knew he was suffering. I knew he was struggling. I knew he was trying to find hope, but he still somehow clung to the faithfulness of God, and he still knew God was in control and able to be trusted, because he had preached about it for years. He had lived it for years. But when everything was taken away from him and he was kind of thrown into this world that he never expected, and he was totally humbled, he was trying to figure out who he was supposed to be and what he was supposed to do next. So I hate to wrap this up, because there's just so much more to be discovered and there's so much more to talk about. We could be here all day. We're home. We're comfortable. I don't mind interviewing him all day. But we want to keep this podcast a reasonable length. So, Kevin, for the last few minutes, let's just talk about one or two of the lessons that you've learned through this journey, and something that might encourage the listener, as well as anything you want to say about Lord of the Rings or the book, or anything to kind of just give them a taste of the progress that you've made and what acceptance might feel like to you and surrender to God throughout this.
Well, I know some people may or may not read it based on the Lord of the Rings theme, so I did that simply because of the title. I found the quote from Sam's speech in movie 2 and book 2 or 3, where he says it's the great stories, the ones that really mattered, and he goes on to say that folk in those stories are the ones that remembered because they were holding on to something. And in there, he says that we're too small to understand why these things happen, basically. And when I found that, remembered that Sam said that, it just jumped out to me. And so when I found that, I'm a guy of structure, so I have to have an outline and a structure before I write anything. You're the opposite. When you write, you just kind of write everything and then find structure.
Kevin, this is not about me. This is about you.
Yeah, well, just confirming that we're the opposite in nearly every way. So once I had an outline, then I could just kind of put my stories in and make it flow. So the point is, the title still stands. I am still too small to understand why, and that's the point. Even looking back, I mean, the book came out 3-4 years ago. I still don't understand why I had a seizure, or I still have seizures, and you always get mad at me for saying this, but I always have to throw it out there. What I've been through, what we've been through, doesn't compare to other terrible tragedies people have. I know anybody's pain is their story and their pain, but I never want to compare what we've been through to cancers and deaths in families, deaths of children, stuff. I mean, but I don't understand why we went through years of infertility, or why we had such horrible money tragedies, or, any other things that's in the book. I don't understand. But the point is that I still have a small perspective. I'm still just a little bunny in a turtle, and I have to trust the owner and the master and the provider and the protector, because he adopted me, and he chose me, and he loves me, and he cares for me, and he's leading me all the way where he wants me to be. But probably my favorite story is chapter 2, where we brought Toby,
the turtle,
cross nation in the moving truck, and he was terrified the entire way, and so I can be just as terrified the same way.
My favorite quote from that chapter is when he asks Toby why and how he got poop on his back. Which may or may not relate to whatever you're going through right now. Yeah. You may feel like your owner is like, how did you get into such a messy situation?
Which is a great segue. In about 3 or 4 years, there's going to be a sequel using life stories I've learned from raising two beautiful adopted girls, and it's going to be based on Lord of the Rings. There's going to be a prologue from Kimberly Patton, and there'll probably be a question of Eden, Shiloh, how'd you get poop on your back? Because I've already said that a couple times. So stay tuned.
So we talked about depression, we talked about micro seizures and losing your memory, and we talked about having a perspective of trusting God even when you don't understand what's going on. And we talked about your book that you're working on that you've been collecting pictures for and stories for. And when our little girls go off to kindergarten, be ready for another book by Kevin. Once again, his book is Too Small to Understand Why, a memoir of caring for rabbits, turtles, hamsters, and faith. Where can they find you, Kevin, in all of your online presence? I know you just have a booming online presence, but if they want to talk to you, which, guys, he's an introvert, just leave him alone. Just, like, pray for him or something. But if they want to talk to you, where can they find you?
I am on all the social media.
You are not.
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I have an Instagram account.
Tell them about your videos.
Once in a while, I post a video on Instagram called Something to Chew On, and it explains a verse or passage of scripture from a deeper perspective.
So I'm a little biased, but Kevin is a great author. He was a great pastor, and now he is a hospice chaplain. And he's an amazing father. And this book will make you think. It'll make you consider how you can have a good perspective on whatever's going on in your life. You can buy the book on Amazon, and I will link it in the show notes. Kevin, thank you for joining me here today.
I didn't have a choice.
That's not true. Thank you for
live here.
Well, I'll see you again in about 3 or 4 years when you release your second book, okay? Deal?
Can I go watch TV now?
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Kevin Patton. To find his book on Amazon, you can click on the link on my website that says podcast. All of those book links actually help support the show because I'm an Amazon affiliate, so you can purchase the book there, or also there will be a link in the show notes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on the Book Therapy Podcast.
Years of caring for bunnies and rabbits, and those are the same thing.
Kevin, I need you to lean in and test the microphone.
Hello.
Keep
This
going.
would be so much easier if we weren't sitting in a closet naked.